Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I brought with me 2 pages to take notes. I'm afraid I was only able to use 1. I really don't understand the contribution of the Honourable Member, that it is very difficult to respond to what he said, because he said basically nothing except, Madam Speaker, to put on record a number of untruths which he and his party, the Honourable Member, have been stating for years. So let me deal with all of those untruths before I go into my response. One of them was that it was not true that the country only had 3 days of money available to it when we took office in 2015. They seem to be very afraid of people being aware of that fact. But I think it's important to refute the motion by indicating that the economy at this time is in very good hands, Madam Speaker. But when we came into office in 2015, the economy had collapsed. And let me give you the indicators of a collapsed economy. When we demitted office in 2010, Madam Speaker, the money in the government's account at the central bank was in credit, Madam Speaker, in May of 2010, in the amount of $6 billion. When we came back into office in 2015, the other government had spent every cent of that $6 billion in credit and had run up the government's overdraft to almost $9 billion. Hence the fact that when we came in 2015, there was 3 days money left in the Treasury. 3 days, Madam Speaker. So they took a positive balance in the overdraft, the government overdraft, of $6 billion, and changed that to a negative minus $9 billion. They burnt up $15 billion in government cash, Madam Speaker. In addition, Madam Speaker, the National Gas Company has always been a safety net for successive governments. From time immemorial, that has always been a very profitable company. And it had built up reserves under the PNM of $14 billion, Madam Speaker. They raided the cash balances of the National Gas Corporation and spent a further $14 billion out of the NGC's deposits. That takes you to almost $30 billion in profligate expenditure under the other side. They also increased government expenditure, Madam Speaker, from $46 billion to $63 billion. And continue to spend like there was no tomorrow, while oil prices dropped from $100. That is the kind of prices they enjoyed, Madam Speaker. We, in this period, between 2015 and 2021, have never seen an oil price of $100. But under that government, they enjoyed oil prices of over $100. Oil prices began to collapse in July of 2014, Madam Speaker. And they watched that price collapse from over 100 to 90 to 80 to 70 to 60 to 40, which is where it was when we came in September 2015. But they spent money like water, even though the national revenues were shrinking rapidly. Irresponsibility. That is what we had to deal with, Madam Speaker. They also gave wage increases in real terms of over 20%. Because when you consolidate cola and you increase allowances, you can't simply look at the nominal increase in wages. You have to look at the whole increase. They gave wage increases of over 20%, but they didn't pay the back pay. So one of the things we had to do over the period, with an oil price dropping from $100 to $25, is to find $6 billion in back pay. And I am proud to be part of a government that did whatever was necessary and took the right decisions, and we paid every cent of that $6 billion in back pay. You see, Madam Speaker, the honourable members opposite live in fantasy land. Fantasy land. Imagine taking expenditure from 46 billion to 63 billion, and you have no source of funds, and you're watching the oil price collapsing. You're watching the gas production going down. You're watching the oil production going down, but you're spending money like water. That is what we had to deal with, and that is what this minister had to deal with. All of this old talk is a figment of their imagination. Let me also put into the record what the facts are. The real economic indicators between 2010 and 2020. And let me deal in particular with this mythology that the economy grew. In 2014, the economy contracted under the previous government by 0.9%, Madam Speaker. And that was with an oil price of $100. Somehow, with an oil price of $100, and oil production and gas production much higher than it is now, because we have declining production. We are a mature province, so that means that our oil fields rapidly decline and you have to keep producing them. So with declining production, but much more than we have now, and oil price double what it is now, they managed to have negative growth in the economy in 2014. What did we do, Madam Speaker? We were faced with a very difficult problem. We had to reduce expenditure from that ridiculous figure of $63 billion without crashing the economy, which we managed to do successfully. And we managed to bring expenditure down into the $50 billion range, Madam Speaker. And as a result of our revenue measures, we were able to increase revenue, Madam Speaker. There are a number of things that we did, very innovative. We changed the entire oil and gas taxation regime, Madam Speaker, from a profit-based taxation regime to a volume-based taxation regime. Because in a profit taxation environment in the energy sector, when oil prices are down, you're not going to get 1 cent. And in fact, because of the incentives given to the energy sector by the other side, irresponsible incentives, tax write-offs, capital expenditure write-offs, accelerated capital expenditure write-offs, because of the low prices of oil, one of the major oil companies, the largest gas producer in Trinidad and Tobago, BP, came to see us in the last quarter of 2015, just after the election, and presented us with graphs and tables to show us that because of what they had done, BP was not going to pay us any money until the year 2024, Madam Speaker. That is what we were facing. So very quickly, applying expert knowledge, expert techniques, we revised the energy taxation regime immediately, moved it away from a profits-based system to a volume-based system, and put an across-the-board royalty of 12.5% on all oil and gas production, and that doubled the revenue from petroleum, Madam Speaker. That is what we did. That is the kind of innovation that is resident in this Minister of Finance and this government, Madam Speaker. And therefore, we were able to grow revenue. Remember, oil price collapsed in 2016 to $25. Collapse from 100 to 25. Gas production going down, oil production going down. And yet, because of innovation and because of knowledge and because of expertise and because of hard work, Madam Speaker, we were able to arrest the decline in revenue and grow our revenue back up from just over 34 billion to 47 billion in 2019. That was no mean feat, Madam Speaker, no mean feat. And when I look at all the statistics that are available, Trinidad and Tobago's inflation rate, what was the headline inflation rate in 2012. It was 8%, Madam Speaker. It continued at that level above 5% right down to the general election of 2015. What is the headline inflation rate today? It is less than 1%, Madam Speaker. And we have maintained headline inflation at 1% or less for the last 4 years, Madam Speaker. Deliberate policy actions of this government. What was food inflation under the UNC? It was 18% in 2012. What was food inflation in 2019? It was less than 1%. These are all policy measures of this government. All initiatives of this Minister of Finance and this government, Madam Speaker. Unemployment. Unemployment has remained steady in the 4 to 5% range under this administration, no matter what challenges we have faced, Madam Speaker. So those are the facts, and I happen to have, I like to quote and misquote from official documents. I happen to have the monetary policy announcement of the central bank dated March 26, 2021. I believe that is today. And I shall read from it. Domestic economic conditions are yet to fully stabilize from the COVID-19 shock. During the fourth quarter of 2020, the energy sector experienced significant production fall-offs for natural gas, liquefied natural gas, and petrochemicals. Production fall-offs. On the other hand, and this is not me speaking, Madam Speaker, this is the central bank. On the other hand, indicators monitored by the central bank suggest that the non-energy sector is slowly recovering, fueled by construction, finance, and insurance. Headline inflation remained contained at 0.8% year-on-year in February 2021, with food inflation decelerating to 2.3% in February 2021. So, who am I to believe? Them or the central bank? Madam Speaker, I understand what the other side is all about, you know. They can't get over the fact that the population adjudicated on them in 2015 and found them wanting. They can't get over the fact that it was not just corruption, but it was their performance as a government that threw them down in 2015. And they can't get over the fact that the population adjudicated on them again in 2020. And again, they can't get over the fact it was the perception of corruption if they came back in, or that they would fail to perform again as they did in 2010 to 2015. They can't get over the fact that the last election was won on two fronts. It was won on our government's fantastic response to COVID-19, and it was won on our government's economic performance over the 2010 to 2015 period. Because what we have been able to do in the last 5 years, Madam Speaker, with an oil price shock in 2015, 2016, and another oil price shock in 2020, in the first 3 months of 2020, and an economic shock that the entire world has suffered because of COVID-19, Madam Speaker, we have been able to keep this country running. We have been able to make sure people get their salaries on time. We have been able to preserve as many jobs as possible. We have kept people whole. We have kept sectors moving. We have kept industry ticking over, Madam Speaker, and all of that under extremely difficult economic circumstances where the prices of our major commodities have simply collapsed. And that was before COVID. Those commodities prices had collapsed, and yet we were able to grow revenue from petroleum by 100%, Madam Speaker, between 2016 and 2019. So since the Honourable Member didn't say anything that I really need to respond to, could you tell me how much more time I have, Madam Speaker?
Your time expires at 3:01:32.
I have 15 minutes. Nice. as I said, the honourable member said nothing of significance. So let us now talk about what this government is doing. Madam Speaker, I want to put into the record an article from the World Economic Forum. I don't expect members opposite to know what that is, but it is the International Organization for Public-Private Cooperation. An article dated November 2020 by John Lexing, Digital Editor, Strategic Intelligence of the World Economic Forum. And this article is all about debt management during COVID-19. And I'd just like to quote from it. The debt load in the United States has only continued to rise, far exceeding the size of the country's economy as measures are enacted to cushion the impact of COVID-19. The US is not alone. Governments around the world have been borrowing heavily as they seek to counter the pandemic. While this doesn't necessarily come as a surprise, the relatively subdued reaction among experts might. The pandemic is further reshaping how many people think about sizable public debt. Those who may once have been spooked by the concept are okay with it now. So even as countries like the UK register record debt, and the public debt to GDP ratio is expected to hit 140% in developed companies, many experts have a general recommendation, and that is keep borrowing. Not so long ago, it was received wisdom that a country's public debt load should stay well shy of the size of its economy. In the US, public debt amounted to 60% of GDP on the eve of the global financial crisis in 2008. And the European Union's founding treaty actually spelled out a public debt cap of 60% of GDP. But like many other things that have been previously taken for granted, the pandemic has scrapped that EU guideline as policymakers scramble to prop up their economies. So, long before COVID-19, many experts were criticizing the single-minded obsession with curtailing public debt as foolish, while noting that debt raised to defeat the Nazis in World War II, presumably a justified expense, had yet to be paid off. Governments have been borrowing from a broad range of investors, including pension funds. Central banks have put some of their most reliable backers. The US Federal Reserve has been buying 80 million in treasury securities per month. So when we look at what is happening around the world, Madam Speaker, and this is not unique to that World Economic Forum, I have the Fiscal Monitor update from the IMF, which is telling us exactly the same thing, that countries all around the world should ensure that their economies keep moving by borrowing money to drive the engines of industry. So that when I see commentary using data and learning from 2010, 2005, 2015, when I see commentary that is obsolete and useless and irrelevant in the face of COVID-19, I wonder when the persons who have the ability to comment on where our economy is going will get serious, Madam Speaker. I wonder what the members opposite would have done when faced with the COVID-19 shock. Would they have cut expenditure by $20 billion and retrenched 30,000 public servants? Would they have devalued the dollar to 15 to 1, Madam Speaker? Because from all that they say, I gather these are the prescriptions from the members opposite. I gather those are their prescriptions. I just want to say what we have done in the last 12 months, because I consider that to be the most important thing that we have done. In terms of putting money in the hands of businesses, I heard a comment about VAT refunds, but it escapes the fact that we have put out $3.5 billion in the middle of COVID to deal with VAT refunds. $500 million in cash and $3 billion in bonds. And I heard the Honourable Member make a weak attempt to denigrate the bonds, but the fact of the matter is that the VAT bonds that were issued by this government in 2020 were fully tradable, fully encashable at 100 cents on the dollar. In fact, as soon as we had issued the bonds, within a couple of days, I got a message from a banker loudly proclaiming to me that he had just encashed for a client the first VAT bond at 100 cents on the dollar. That is what this government did. So we gave them these bonds that are equivalent to cash. They could keep them, use them as security, or they could cash them as they see fit. $3 billion worth of VAT bonds in the middle of a pandemic, Madam Speaker. What else has this government done during the last 12 months, Speaker? And what would they have done differently? What would they have done differently? We have given out hundreds of millions of dollars in income support and salary relief grants, Madam Speaker. Because one of the things that we recognized during COVID, and this is why this Minister of Finance moved with alacrity to access the necessary funding, to go to the Heritage Fund, to go to the multilateral financial institutions, the IDB, the Andean Bank of Latin America, the World Bank, the private investment climate in the United States, the domestic banking sector, Madam Speaker. We moved with alacrity to access the necessary funding so that we ensure that people had food on the table during the COVID-19 pandemic. That is one of the first things that this government did, make sure that people would not starve, as has happened in so many countries. Even in developed countries, I remember, Madam Speaker, seeing a video of people in Italy, a developed country, where people were starving, Madam Speaker, because of the COVID-19 lockdown and because of the fact that it took that country's government a little while to mobilize itself to provide relief to its citizens. But not us, Madam Speaker. Within weeks, we had mobilized through the Ministry of Social Development food support directly through hampers, through food cards, through food baskets, through $30 million we gave to the churches for them to distribute through their food grant program, and helped over 100,000 people, Madam Speaker. That is what we did. We looked at every aspect of the economy and what should be done about it. We provided soft loans to the private sector, interest-free, moratorium for the first 2 years, concessional financing for the credit union sector, $50 million in grants for the hotel sector in Tobago. Everything that the Ministry of Health required to do its business and to create a parallel health sector. Madam Speaker, the parallel health sector of Trinidad and Tobago is the envy of the world. The envy of the world. There is no other country in the world that was able to create and maintain a parallel health sector as we have. No other country in the world. You look at CNN, you look at BBC, and you will see hospitals were overflowing all over the world in the developed countries, Madam Speaker, not in Trinidad and Tobago. And this is because we, in the Ministry of Finance, mobilized the necessary funding to make sure there was salaries for healthcare workers, equipment for the hospitals, and we, in fact, were able to open new hospitals. We were able to mobilize financing so that we could open the Point Fortin Hospital, the Arima Hospital, Madam Speaker. That is a fantastic achievement on the part of this government, and I'm proud to have been part of that, Madam Speaker. In addition, Madam Speaker, as borne out by this central bank report, we didn't stop there. We recognize that cash flow is the engine of every business in this country. So we also use some of the funding that we got from the Heritage Fund and from the multilateral agencies and from the domestic banking sector to pay bills, to pay arrears of bills, billions of dollars in bills left for us by the other government when they had that crazy election spending in 2015, where they just awarded contracts, free sheet, ridiculous contracts at twice and 3 times and 4 times the market rate, didn't pay the contractors, and left us holding the bill to come and pay afterwards when we came in. And we have painstakingly over the last 5 years, Madam Speaker, dealt with these arrears, systematically reducing the liability of the government to contractors, Madam Speaker. Billions of dollars spent in 2020 to reduce arrears to contractors. Billions of dollars spent, Madam Speaker, to stimulate construction in housing, in infrastructure, in community facilities, and so on, Madam Speaker. Because we in the Ministry of Finance recognized that we had to keep things going. And I would ask any one of them, what would they have done differently, Madam Speaker? What would they have done differently? Would they have devalued the dollar? Would they have sent public servants home? Would they have stopped the senior citizens' pension? Would they have scrapped social welfare grants? Because when you listen to them, when you listen to their critique, you get the impression that that is their solution. Devalue the dollar, retrench people, stop spending on social welfare. You get the impression that that is their critique, Madam Speaker. But we are not going to do that. We have a medium-term macroeconomic plan, Madam Speaker. Medium-term macroeconomic plan. And with all the old talk from their side, I will put paid to the untruth that they are trying to propagate. If what they were saying is true, if what they were saying was true, we would not have won the 2020 election. But let's put that aside. Let us put that aside. If what they were saying was true, then it would have been impossible in the height of COVID-19 for this government and this Ministry of Finance to be able to maintain an investment grade rating with Standard & Poor's and maintain our investment credit rating, our credit rating with Moody's, Madam Speaker, in the middle of COVID, May and June of 2020, while virus raging, while all you're seeing in developed countries is people lining up by a row of coffins. I mean, the scenes from the other countries, Madam Speaker, terrible. When you look at Italy, they come in with trucks to pick up coffins. That wasn't happening in Trinidad and Tobago. The middle of COVID, countries all over the world locked down. Yet we, in the Ministry of Finance, using expert consultants, both externally and locally, were able to maintain our international credit ratings, while every country in Latin America and the Caribbean was losing theirs. Every one of them was losing their rating. We maintained ours. And because of that achievement, this Minister of Finance was able to go onto the international capital market in June of 2020, in the middle of COVID, and contrary to the nonsense that I hear from the other side, we were able to raise $500 million on the international capital market in 2 hours. In 2 hours. It was oversubscribed by 100% within an hour, Madam Speaker. And I asked the bankers, I asked the arrangers of finance who were working for the government, I said, how come in the middle of COVID, Trinidad and Tobago government could raise $500 million in 2 hours with 100% oversubscription at an interest rate of 4.5% over 10 years? How was it possible to do that? They said, Minister, you don't understand the regard that the international community has for Trinidad and Tobago under this government. You see, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And we continue to get unsolicited offers from international banks to provide financing for the government of Trinidad and Tobago because our reputation in the international world remains intact and remains high, Madam Speaker. So I really don't know what to say about this motion. When we came into office, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund was US $5.6 billion. As of yesterday, it was over US $5.7 billion. So what are they talking about the country bankrupt? So US $5.7 billion in the Heritage Fund. Over 30 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars. Actually closer to 40 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars. That is not a sign of bankruptcy, Madam Speaker. They just throw out words, empty words. But everybody in this country is aware of the difficulties that we have had. Everybody is aware of the balancing act of this Minister of Finance to keep the economy going, to keep spending in the productive sector, to make sure those who are most in need get help, and yet make sure that our metrics,
Minister
our
of Finance. The time is now spent.
reject this motion.